In eye care, 2020 vision means clarity, but leadership requires us to see beyond 2020, beyond day to day, beyond the challenges, and beyond what's possible. Welcome to Beyond 2020 Leadership. I'm your host, Tamara Nord, and today we're talking about something every patient experiences, whether they realize it or not: team culture. Patients may not know your revenue budget. They don't know your NPS score. They don't know your continuity of care goals, but they absolutely know how your team makes them feel. When patients walk into a clinic, they experience the culture you've built. They feel it in the greeting, the handoff, the teamwork, the tone, and they feel it in the energy. And the strongest eye care practices understand something incredibly important. Culture isn't soft. Culture drives performance. So today we're going to talk about what high-performing eye care teams do differently and how leaders build cultures that create memorable patient experiences and some of the most important lessons I've learned along the way. And one of those lessons is this: great leaders don't lead everyone the same way. They flex. Sometimes people need clarity. Sometimes they need coaching. Sometimes they need encouragement. And sometimes they need you to trust them and just get out of the way. That's the heart of situational leadership. It's the idea that leadership is not one size fits all. The best leaders pay attention to what the person needs in that moment, and then they adjust their approach style accordingly. One of the biggest mistakes leaders make is believing that they have to choose between culture and results. I hear it all the time. Might sound like this: we need to focus on performance, or we need to focus on culture. But the reality is that the best teams can do both. And in my experience, culture and performance are not separate. They're 100% connected. Strong cultures create strong results, and strong results reinforce strong cultures. When people trust each other, communicate clearly, and feel valued, performance follows. And what I've learned over time is that when results are slipping, the first question isn't always, how do we push harder? Sometimes the better question is, what does this team need from me right now? Do they need more direction, more coaching, more support, more trust? That's where leadership gets practical. Because when you diagnose what people need and respond your leadership style to fit that behavior, the culture will get stronger, and so does the performance. Many of you might be familiar with situational leadership because leaders learn to adapt amongst these four styles. There's directing, coaching, supporting, and delegating. And based on a person's competence at the moment, you have to be able to commit on a specific goal or task using one of these styles. One of the most rewarding experiences in my career involved a clinic that was struggling. The team wasn't happy. Communication had broken down. Everyone seemed frustrated. Patient complaints were increasing. The immediate temptation would have been to focus on the numbers: sales, productivity, KPI metrics. And yes, those things matter. But what I knew was something more important. Numbers were not the first problem. The culture was. So instead of leading with pressure, I led with diagnosis. I started asking questions. How are things going? What concerns do you have? Where are you stuck? What have you tried? What is making it harder for this team to be successful right now? Those were not casual questions. They were leadership questions. And before you can improve performance, you have to understand what's underneath it. Was it a clarity issue, a confidence issue, a communication issue? It could possibly be a trust issue. And once we got honest about that, we began to rebuild. We clarified expectations. I had to get very clear at what good looked like again, not in a harsh way, but in a helpful way. I was able to communicate to the team using phrases that I found very beneficial, like what I'd like us to focus on is creating a more consistent patient experience. What I'd like you to do is make sure that every patient handoff is clear, warm, and intentional. And since this has been inconsistent, would it be helpful if I provided more direction around what that should look like? That was part of the work. But there was another part too. This team didn't just need direction, they also needed support. They needed to know that their voice mattered. They needed to know improvement was possible, and they needed to see progress. So we improved communication. We celebrated the small wins. We listened to each other more carefully. And most importantly, we rebuilt the trust. That's when things began to change. Patient comments started shifting, and instead of complaints about wait times and confusion, we started hearing things like, "Everyone here is so friendly. I felt welcomed. The team worked so well together." And that's the lesson. Patients experience culture before they experience your metrics. They feel the teamwork before they even understand what KPI you're chasing on a dashboard. As culture improved, patient experience improved. And as the patient experience improved, the performance improved. And that's why I believe culture is not a distraction from results. It is often the path that is going to lead us to the success and the results. One of the best leadership decisions I ever made was hiring someone who had no eye care experience. On paper, they weren't the strongest candidate. Other applicants had more experience, more technical knowledge, more industry exposure. But this individual had something I couldn't ignore: energy, curiosity, a willingness to learn, a passion for helping people. And I remember thinking, I can teach eye care. I cannot teach attitude. So I hired them. And now, what made that decision work wasn't just hiring the right person, it was leading them the right way once they were on my team. Because when someone is new, enthusiasm is wonderful, but enthusiasm is not enough. New people need clarity. They need a leader who can say, "Here's what great looks like. Here's what I'd like you to do. Let me show you how we do this. Here's an example." That's a directing style. Not because the person is weak, because they're learning. A good leadership person recognizes that early development needs structure. So we taught, we modeled, we clarified standards, we made exceptions and expectations visible right before them, and then they grew. And my leadership had to grow with them. And at that point, it sounded more like, "How are things going? What questions do you have? Look how much you've already learned. Let me explain why we do it this way, because this really matters to the patient experience." That's when it becomes coaching. Still giving direction, but also building confidence and understanding. And over time, that person became one of the strongest team members on my team. Patients loved them, coworkers respected them, their confidence grew, and eventually they became someone others looked to for guidance. Why? Because they cared deeply about people and because they were led in a way that matched what they needed at each stage of growth. And that's why I always tell leaders, hire for attitude, train for skill, because patients remember how you make them feel more than they remember the technical expertise. And when you hire someone with heart and you lead them well, incredible things will happen. One of the most powerful leadership lessons I have also learned is that recognition has the ability to change someone's career. I remember a team member who was incredibly capable but didn't fully see it in themselves. They showed up every day. They worked hard, supported their teammates. They took care of patients, but they rarely received recognition. And what I've learned is this: sometimes people don't need more talent. Sometimes they need more confidence. And sometimes they need someone to see in them what they cannot see in themselves. So one day I made it a point to publicly acknowledge their impact, not just what they were doing, but who they were becoming. I highlighted their growth, their leadership potential, and the difference they were making on the team. And privately, I had a conversation that sounded more like support than an instruction. When I let them know I see leadership in you, the team is already responding to you. I'm confident you can take on more. What do you want your focus to be next? And what is the best way for me to support you? That matters, because once someone has competence, the next leadership move is not always more direction. Sometimes that next move is belief. And sometimes the next move is creating space for them to step forward. And you can literally see that person's confidence shift. Over the next several months, they started volunteering for more responsibility, taking initiative, leading projects, and mentoring other new individuals. Today, they're in a leadership role. What changed? Their talent did not change. Their confidence did. And that's why recognition is so powerful. Recognition tells people, I see you. I trust you. You're growing. You matter here. And when leaders recognize people intentionally, confidence grows. Confident team members create better patient experiences because people who feel valued naturally help others feel valued. So let's talk about accountability. Many leaders avoid difficult conversations because they worry about damaging relationships. And I've learned that the opposite is often true. One of the strongest relationships I've built with a leader started from a difficult conversation. There was a talented manager who consistently missed follow-through commitments. Nothing major, but enough that it was impacting the team. I couldn't ignore it, or I could have. I could have also hoped it would have improved. I could have told myself it wasn't that serious. But leadership doesn't serve people by avoiding the truth. It serves people by telling the truth with care. So we had an honest conversation, not about blame, not about criticism, about growth. I remember asking, here's the impact it's having on the team. Can you help me turn it around? Here's what I'm seeing. I know you're capable of more. What's getting in the way? Where are you stuck? What have you tried? What else could you do? That's what healthy accountability sounds like. It's clear, it is respectful, it's direct, and it's rooted in belief. I wasn't trying to catch them doing something wrong. I was trying to help them become who I knew they could be. And that conversation changed everything. That leader later told me it was one of the most impactful conversations of their career. Why? Because accountability communicated belief. It communicated that I cared enough to address the issue, that I respected them enough to be honest, and that I believed they were capable of better. And today, we often talk about accountability as correction, and I see it differently. Accountability is an investment in someone's potential. And when accountability becomes part of culture, patients benefit because teams become more dependable, more consistent, more collaborative. And those are the kind of teams patients trust. At the end of the day, patients don't remember every clinical detail. They remember experiences. They remember how they felt. They remember whether the team seemed connected to each other, whether they felt valued, whether someone went above and beyond to make it a personal experience for them. The strongest eye care teams understand that every interaction matters. The greeting matters, the handoff matters, frame styling experience matters, and the checkout experience matters. Every team member contributes to the patient's story. And one of the marks of a truly healthy team is that when a leader does not have to control every moment. Why? Because they're capable, committed people, and they eventually need something different from you. They don't need constant instruction. They don't need you hovering over them. They don't need every answer. They need trust. And that's when leadership sounds more like, you take the lead on this. I trust your judgment. Can you update me on your goals? I know you're taking the lead, but I'm here if you need me and when you need me. What new ideas do you have about your work? That kind of leadership creates ownership, and ownership changes the patient experience. Because when people feel trusted, they show up differently. They notice more, they take more initiative, they solve problems faster, they create moments of care that no script can manufacture. And patients feel that. They may never know the leadership strategy behind them, but they feel the outcome. And as you think about your own team this week, I want to challenge you to ask a different question. Not just what are numbers producing, what goals are we hitting, what experience are we creating is the question we want to lead with. And then ask one more question. What does each person on my team need from me right now? A clearer standard? A better example? Does someone need coaching? A chance to talk through what's getting in the way? A little more encouragement and clarity? Does someone need support, recognition, confidence as a reminder that you believe in them? Or does someone need trust, autonomy, room to lead? Choose one person, choose one conversation, and take one action this week. Maybe it's recognition, maybe it's coaching, maybe it's accountability, and maybe it's simply listening. Because culture is built one interaction at a time, and leadership gets more powerful when it becomes more intentional. Building a high-performing team isn't about finding perfect people. It's about creating an environment where people can grow, contribute, and thrive. It's about knowing when to be clear, when to coach, when to encourage, and when to trust. When leadership and accountability work together, the patient experience improves. Teams become stronger, leaders develop, and results follow. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Beyond 2020 Leadership. And until next time, keep leading with purpose and remember to see beyond today.